So we ought to have to remember that when science says it has a cure for something, it will have a different cure next year. When we buy something because it is best, then there was never one like it. Within 2 years, there will be one much better. All the way along, these things go. But when it comes to the values of life, is the American home any stronger than it was? Are our young people growing up clean? Are the various forms of business we're involved in, are they honorable? Is the average person building a character that he can live with for the rest of his life? Are we fair to the children or the aged? Or to the sick or the well? To the rich or the poor? Everything goes along carefully covering up the weaknesses of every phase of it. And under the general heading of knowledge, we place a limitation upon what we can think, what we can believe, and how we should interpret the facts of life. So now, here and there is a breaking through into another dimension. Knowledge is beginning to mean something that solves something, rather than simply perpetuates. We know that young people are going to school. Knowledge now is how to get sufficient insights to get a good job. Also, while this is happening, the moral structure of youth is collapsing. And with this falls also most of the older generation. We do not recognize that by living on the surface of thinking, we are condemning ourselves to the errors and fallacies of surface living. We are not here to live on the surface of the mind. We are not here to live only on the pleasures of the mind, or the pleasures of the flesh, or the pleasures of the heart, or the pleasures of luxury. We are here as individuals to improve, to grow, to think, and to understand life. We are also here, if possible, to see that we can pass on to another generation a world a little better for our having been here, rather than a world falling apart because of our mistaken understanding. Now, on the opposite side of this is wisdom. Now, how shall we define wisdom? Wisdom is no longer a surface. Wisdom is now an interpretation of value. Every bit of so-called knowledge is capable of being examined by wisdom. There is nothing that we do, nothing that we have, nothing that we hope that does not in some way tie into the concept of wisdom. And wisdom can be suggested as meaning. It is the something that amounts to something. It is something that makes an experience more important than 30 days in jail. It is something that makes it more important to stay sober than to try to get sober. Wisdom begins to use the ideas that we find in knowledge and ensoul them, give character to them, give meaning to them, and bestow upon each one of them a dimension of growth. All growth has to be included. Knowledge has to grow. And the moment knowledge grows now, it becomes associated with fallacies because of inexperience. We are not able now to use knowledge in a dimension of growth. Actually, knowledge comes to us from the outside. The interpretation of knowledge comes to us from the inside. We are gradually learning that from the inside of ourselves, we have to explain the things that are happening in the outside world. Now, this isn't easy, because the things that are happening on the outside are inconsistent with most of the values that come from the internal life of the person. The thing that has made this matter endurable is the fact that the inside, the wisdom of the individual has not been developed. Therefore, with the fallacies of the moment, there is no remarkable, intense rebellion from within him. Rebellion is a very individual matter. The individual who's had enough misery and enough suffering decides to do what he can about it. On the other hand, many under the same provocation do nothing. But one of the problems is that knowledge is valuable only to the degree that it can be ensouled, that it can be enriched to become meaningful, to stand for something that will help to advance the general state of mankind. So we look around a little bit to see what we can do, if possible, to increase the development of wisdom. Well, what shall we say is the best place to look for wisdom? Well, for the most part, wisdom belongs to what we call idealism. Idealism is motivation. When an ideal is stated, it means that the motivation is constructive. Constructive motivation means that it is dedicated to common good, that it is dedicated to well-being, that it is not going to compromise to allow for the corruption of value. So when we begin to think of wisdom, we take the home that is broken by knowledge and put it together again by mercy. We try to do something to mend with the heart that which has been injured by the mind. We do everything that we can to ensoul the knowledge that has hurt us. And in so doing, we discover that this knowledge can suddenly become a tremendous source of good. But it is only good when it is ensouled. There is no good in the fact that it is a general average or adage that honesty is the best policy. It is only transformed into wisdom when the practice of honesty proves this, and proves it by changing the patterns of life. Life goes on under knowledge. Life is changed under wisdom. Life grows because deeper and fuller meanings are bestowed upon it. It challenges the individual to grow. It does not leave him to be born and to die in the same misery. It does not leave him with a broken home or rebellious children. It does not leave him with incurable ailments caused by his own foolishness. All the way along, wisdom cures, heals, transforms into a better way of life. And yet it has to work with the same factors. The individual has to keep the job. But having kept the job, the wisdom steps in and tries to do something to this job, by means of which the person working in it is not only making a living, but is making a life that is important. If the individual can go to work every morning, 9 o'clock for 40 years, and come out at the end of that time simply old and tired, and yet with the same job and with the same limitations, the individual who has a certain genius for growth within himself can transform this by conquering the job, by making something out of it that fulfills and getting away from the monotony of worthlessness. That is another one of the problems of knowledge. Knowledge can become worthless because of boredom and exhaustion. We are tired of making the same mistake. We are tired of sitting at the same desk for a lifetime. We are tired of working with the same situations that arise frequently. We are tired of the wars that call upon us. We are tired of the false peace that come with them. We are tired with everything that is falling apart and is failing to grow. Now, we have only limited facilities, but there is always something that can be done about this. And I've noticed in working with people who have become despondent over conditions of life, that nearly all of them are despondent because they have been unable in their own minds to accomplish a transmutation of something monotonous, objectionable, or debilitating. Yet there is an alchemy that comes with wisdom. Alchemy is the power to transform base metals into gold. It is the power to transform the daily experiences of life into a meaningful pattern of growth, so that the individual will leave this world a better person than he was when he came in. Today he may be a worse person. So we have this problem of what are we going to do about it? How are we going to change these things? How are we going to transform the monotony of knowledge into the dynamics of wisdom. Now, one thing about monotony is that, as one friend told me once, he didn't like monotony because it was so monotonous. And this is very largely true. There is no excitement, no thrill, no achievement, nothing but keeping on and hoping that the job will last longer than we do. This is not very much of an inducement. So we have to try to find out how we can get some of these circumstances into our present knowledge. Well, one of the things we have to do is to realize that much of this we have to do ourselves. We have to recognize the need of becoming involved in the progress we hope to achieve. The young family with 2 or 3 small children cannot depend upon the public school system to get him out or get these children out of the monotonous, comparatively meaningless despondency which comes constantly with knowledge that has no outlet. So the problem is that the reforms have to begin themselves in the person. And Ben Franklin was a great exponent of common sense. To him, common sense was the most uncommon thing in the world, because common sense was the power of the non-scholastic to control and direct a life. Common sense tells us what we can do when we are tired of perpetual failure within ourselves. We go and study at the Sorbonne, we do here at Heidelberg, we do all these things, but we're still working with knowledge on the same level. We are still trying to get an art or a science, a craft or a trade, but we are not trying to become better people. We're not trying to grow, we're trying to find ways to get rich without too much hard work. So these things do not satisfy very well. But supposing we recognize the importance that common sense comes on where monotony and so-called knowledge fail. Now, common sense is just natural honesty. It is an intuitive grasp of realities, and is probably the most powerful educating force that there is. And yet we don't dare to trust to it, because common sense may teach us to go in the opposite direction from that in which we look for profit and fame. So we have to start with something. And those who are out of school and about settled down in life have a great opportunity to begin to experiment with the ensouling of facts. When a fact ensouled becomes a truth, and we are in need of more truths. We are needing very definitely people whose vision extends far enough into the future to really understand what we're up against, but to really know the condition we're building for ourselves. There's a lot of talk now about the 21st century, and there's a lot of evidence wandering around that we're already trying to ruin it. Not because we mean to, but because we're taking knowledge instead of wisdom to work with. We are not trying to learn how to change that which has obviously failed. We are trying to figure some way to perpetuate that which was never real. So we have to think a little bit about getting into line for more wisdom and getting prepared to realize that everything in nature consists of a body and a soul. Now, we can't hardly think of the soul as being associated with logic. We hardly have difficulty in imagining that things that are the common usage of mankind have souls. And yet arithmetic has a soul. Music has a soul. Art has a soul. Digging ditches has a soul. Every profession has a soul, and a more exalted one. And most of the members of the profession do not live up to it. Over 2,000 years ago, the oath of Hippocrates was given to medicine. And we have spent the last century trying to get rid of it. We do not want it because it demands idealism. It demands integrity and makes the physician, first of all, the servant of all the gods. This is in the spirit of wisdom, but we're trying to get it back down again into the spirit of knowledge. We know the code. We can recite it, but we can't use it. And that's because we are not building into ourselves the common sense, the natural virtues and integrities which are bestowed by nature and mutilated by human nature.